part 2 of the discussion on Joss Whedon and Neil Gaiman and the problem so many people have with male feminists. So the first thing I thought of when that person sent me that comment was this idea of when a person from a privileged identity enters a space for people of marginalized identities and sort of takes up all of the oxygen in the room, right? A couple of years ago, we had this huge scandal where, like, there was a professor who pretended to be indigenous, a professor who pretended to be Black and Afro-Latina, there was a graduate student who pretended to be Black, there was another person who pretended to be Latina, right? And it just all speaks to this idea of, like, it's not, and Rachel Dolezal was the president of a chapter of the NAACP, right? The reason that it grates a lot of people and it like irks them and just like feels a little weird is that this person isn't like sitting in the background, like silently learning and absorbing knowledge, right? They are rising to the top of the ranks. They are taking opportunities and oxygen from other people, people who could be allies, people who are actually helpful, and like making it about themselves, right? The reason that so many people are having this like affront to the idea of calling themselves male feminists with regards to abusers and like Neil Gaiman and Joss Whedon is that they were not only champions of marginalized identities, right? In this case, because it was the 90s and the early aughts and like the 2010s, I guess, for Neil Gaiman, like champions for women, they were also like patting themselves on the back for it and like being applauded at length for it. And that was me putting my sociology hat on, but as a person, especially a person from multiple marginalized identities, this is so fucked up. Especially these three who rose to prominence by using stereotypes, but that is a whole other conversation. When I was doing research for this video, it got cut off, but the University of Mississippi Press published this book, A Portrait of the Auteur as Fanboy, The Construction of Authorship in Transmedia Franchises by Anastasia Salter and Mel Stanfill, and chapter 5 is Joss Whedon and the Allegedly Feminist Fanboy Auteur. Two things really stood out to me here. One is that Whedon was branded a feminist, right? And he like sort of took up that mantle and was like, I am a feminist and I love women. In that infamous The Undoing of Joss Whedon piece by Lila Shapiro, he does have a quote where he's like, I've always been a feminist. I had a strong mom and I like love strong women. But this chapter is also saying that he doesn't necessarily walk the walk, right? Like if you ask any real Buffy head, they will say, oh, he's kind of a feminist because he had like really, really incredible female characters. But then how did he treat them, right? Buffy terrorized. Willow, evil. Cordelia suffered more than any human being has ever suffered on Angel. Don't get me started on Cordelia, right? He made the character of Cordelia fall in love with a baby that was grown up because the actress got pregnant, right? And she has spoken on the record about this. Michelle Trachtenberg was not allowed to be alone with him on set. There are so many things that were just absolutely wrong with this portrayal of him as this like champion feminist. The last thing that I noticed is that Whedon actively leverages the illusion of intimacy enabled by Twitter and fan sites. I was like, wait, this sounds so familiar. And it's like, oh, I just read it because Neil Gaiman did the exact same thing. One of the ways that he was able to lure victims in, his victims, again, were these very, very lonely young women who had no friends or family and would come to like work for him and his wife and then were assaulted by him, right? So like he was creating this image of himself as not only a feminist, but a champion for like the downtrodden and like creating intimacy with them before assaulting them. Like there are so many layers to how fucked up it is. Again, the reason that this rankles people so much is because there are so many stories like this where people will position themselves as champions of one thing and end up doing another, use their power inside these groups as like further extensions of like active societal problems, right? So like racism or misogyny or homophobia or whatever, right?